I've been having a little bit of issues with the toggle here. It's kind of loose. It's hard to see. I don't think you'll be able to in this. You can see there it kind of is a little bit loose and it feels weird when you're using it. I'm not going to be doing a full disassembly of this, but I do want to fix that issue. Another issue that I had with the atomic purple Basstop covers here is, if you can see, there's a little bit of a gap there, and this is the one I had the most trouble with. I actually had to kind of take this one back apart a few times, and I'm about to do it again to try and fix these gaps. All the screws in here I've tightened and loosened to try and get the appropriate torque on them, especially for these top buttons here were really hard to get the appropriate torque on to make sure that they click and work properly again. So that's basically what this video is going to be about. I'm just going to take it apart and see if I can fix, I know I can fix this, that's not a problem, but I'm also going to see if I can fix this gap too. I think it's just because these are plastic, and when they get shipped, they're not shipped in, you know, a protective box or anything. They're just kind of in an envelope, and they either get warped or you know, things get set on top of them and they lose their form. I had the same issue with this, where right here, if you pull this up a little bit, this entire bottom piece right here was warped so bad that I actually had to get my heat gun out to heat up the plastic to bend it back into place. And if I didn't have a heat gun, it would have been a lot more difficult, but there's still a little bit of a bump right here. It's almost impossible to see, where it looks like, you know, it looks like the screw is not screwed in all the way, but it is. It's just that this plastic casing won't fully sit back down. Other than that, the actual, you know, atomic purple and the Basstop replacement shells, they look great. I mean, I would say that they're worth the $44.99. It was a lot of fun to do the replacement shell, to actually take them apart and put it back together, but it's really only fun if you like doing that type of. So, alright, let's see if I can take this thing back apart and fix it. These screws here, you want to make sure that you unscrew them a little bit at a time. That way you don't put unnecessary pressure on this plastic. You don't want to warp the plastic because it is very fragile. And these screw holes, the thread is super easy to strip. The plastic just kind of rips. So you have to be careful screwing them out and screwing them back in, because eventually the thread will just, there basically isn't a thread. The first time you screw the screw in, kind of, it just threads in there. So if you do it too tight, then it will strip, and then that'll basically be it. The only thing you'll be able to do at that point would be to I don't know, maybe like fill the hole with some super glue and then screw back into it, try and create a new thread or something. Okay. It's really not difficult to do this. The main difficulty is just the stress involved. Everything is so tiny, and even if you're very, very careful, it's still very easy to accidentally break something. And no matter how careful you are, there's always going to be a chance of something like that happening. I have yet to break anything, but I have felt like I've come pretty close with these R buttons. The plastic is just cheap, and I don't know, it was very close to breaking it. Luckily I have a couple spare Joy-Cons, but I mean they're expensive, I don't want to waste money. Okay, so once you get the case off, you don't need the tri-screw tip anymore. You can go to the regular Phillips, but you do need a good tri-bit to get the back panel off. I'm trying to do this with as little disassembly as possible. I don't want to have to redo everything. And there's 3 types of screws. There's these bronze looking screws. See if you can see this. These are bronze Phillips. Then you have these are the 4 tri-tip. They're only 4, they hold the back panel on. And then there's little silver screws that I haven't actually gotten to just yet in doing this, but that's it. Those are the only 3 screws. The silver ones are right here. You can kind of, in the light here, you can see the difference. You have the bronze, and then you have the silver. That's it. You just got to make sure you put those in the appropriate places. Okay, so the issue that I'm having with this is that this is loose. You can see that it's loose. See, it's kind of there you go. You can see that it's wiggling around in here. This screw I've tightened down pretty tight. I just think that I haven't. Again, these holes aren't really threaded. You have to thread them by screwing the screw in. So it can feel a little tough, and it's hard to judge when to stop sometimes, because it's going to feel pretty hard screwing it in the whole time. Let's see here. Okay, so it looks like that did it. Now we can flip it over. Yeah, that feels a lot better. Before, when I would, specifically when I would press up, the whole thing felt like it shifted up about 1 millimeter, which is exactly what it was doing, and it was not too noticeable at the beginning, but after, a couple hours of playing Zelda, once you notice it, then you just can't not notice it anymore. It was getting on my nerves. So luckily it was a quick fix. That seems fine. I'm going to put this thing back together now. I don't think that had anything to do at all with the gap. I think the gap is probably caused, again, by the plastic just being warped. We'll tighten these screws in a little bit more, just to see if maybe that helps. The problem is if you tighten these screws too much, which I feel like I am, but I'm just going to see here. If you tighten them too much, these buttons don't actually press down properly. And the gap is more of just a, you can't really feel the gap, but you can barely see it, but it's just aesthetic. I want it to look as close to the original Joy-Con as possible. I just don't like when things are a little bit off, even if you can't notice it. I know it's there and I want to fix it. Okay, so this has gotten twisted around. Let me see if I can get it twisted back without breaking. Just so that little cable is just so fragile. All right, let me put this back in first. Taking this one apart is about the same as taking the other one apart. The only difference is it has this IR reader right here, and it has NFC underneath this, which is like a sticker, and it is it has some copper wiring, so you can't just pull it off. If you do, you may bend or break the copper wiring. It's very fragile, so you have to be careful. But other than that, it's about the same. Taking these things apart really is all about order, and making sure that you go in reverse order to get it back in together. It's very easy to skip a step by accident and not realize it until you're about 3 steps ahead, and then you just have to reverse and redo everything. But I mean, if you have to do it again, then that just means you'll be more confident and better at doing it the second, third, fourth. I mean, you just kind of keep on growing with your mistake, which is why after I did this one honestly took me about 3 hours to do, because I just wanted to be super meticulous about it. Once I did this one, the second one was easy. I could take it apart, put it back together in probably 30 minutes pretty easily now, but you have to go through that learning process. Otherwise, it will feel complicated, and when that happens, you lose your confidence, and then it's just even more hard. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Maybe I'm not. No, there's 3 screws here. So let me pop these 3 screws back in. One goes here. Okay, so again, like when you take anything apart, you don't want to screw one screw in completely. You want to screw them in a little bit at a time. So they're not all the way screwed in yet. Let's say they're about 80%, but now I want to screw them in into their kind of appropriate torque, which you have to be the judge of, because there's nothing that's going to tell you what's appropriate or not really until you get everything back together. So that feels okay, because when these are too tight, buttons won't work properly. So the fact that this button right here is working on both sides means that it's fine. And we can do this side. Come back up to the top here, make sure that they're tight enough. Everything feels good, nothing's wiggling. And that really should be it. Let me plug the make sure this plus right here can sometimes be a problem too, so make sure that this is not a problem. As I'm pressing this, it actually does feel a little too tight. It is too tight. It's borderline though. Like it might actually loosen up. It's real close. Everything else feels really good though. I'd probably say 1 out of every 10 clicks, maybe 1 out of every 15 clicks. Like right there, that one click it didn't actually actuate. I think it's okay though. Let me just see if I can move the rubber grommet here, just shuffle it around a little bit, maybe just make it a little bit better. So I really don't want to. See right there, it didn't actuate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the screw up just a tiny bit. That was like a quarter of a turn maybe. That actually feels better. All right, so that's a very good example of what you have to do when you do this. You have to make sure that you don't want to just unscrew everything and then screw everything back in. Make sure it's really about, again, order, and make sure you have the appropriate torque on those. Otherwise, once you get this thing back together and then you realize something's wrong, if you did it all at one time, you're not going to know where the problem is. If you do it in sections and then test, then you're going to, you're going to narrow it down to, at least, the last 3 or 4 steps. So it's a lot easier. The first time I did this, I just did it all in one go. I was very careful with everything, but I didn't really stop to make sure everything was torqued properly. That's because I didn't really realize, I didn't really know if that was, like, I didn't know I had to do that. I mean, I knew that it was something that I may have to do, but I didn't know at what degree, so I just did everything and then ended up having to take it back apart. But again, like I said before, it just helps you learn. Some of these things are kind of frustrating, but okay, there we go. Saw a lot of videos online. Well, let me rephrase that. I didn't see a lot of videos online about how to do this. There are some. One thing I realized is a lot of people were saying that this was the hardest thing they've ever did, and then some people were saying that it was not hard at all and very easy. I would say that this is a kind of subjective thing. It's really more about confidence than anything else. Anything can be simplified if you're confident in it, and you're not going to get confident in doing it until you do it. So, again, first Joy-Con took 3 hours, second Joy-Con took, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. It was very, very easy at that point. But if you would have asked me if it was easy before I did the first one, then I would have said no. After the second one, yeah, it wasn't too bad. So the good news is that the gap looks like it's been closed a lot. Not perfect, but acceptable. I'll take that. The plus button feels good. Everything feels really good. It feels better now. So let me put the tri-tip head back on the screwdriver and then screw these screws back in, and that should be it. Okay, put these in the holes. So I'll do about 3 turns there, about 3 turns there, same, and then the same here. So it's not all the way tightened down. Now we're gonna kind of torque them in a little bit, so a couple more turns. Couple more turns, couple more, and a couple more, And now on the third time around, we're going to actually tighten them all the way down. Okay, so this corner is a problem, but should be easily fixed. This plus is no longer pressing at all. Now I've already torqued one of the two screws that you can to fix that. So I know it's not the internal screw because I've already fixed that one, so it has to be this external screw here. So what I can do is do about a half turn and it's fixed. Yep. Yep, no problem whatsoever, it clicks every time. So tighten that screw a little bit too much, but again, because I made sure to begin with it wasn't the internal screw, I knew exactly which screw it was. If I would have done all this together and this wouldn't have worked, then I could have unscrewed this right here, but that wouldn't have fixed it because it would have been the internal screw, and I would have to take the whole thing back apart to fix it. So, you know, kind of figure these things out as you go. Everything feels good. Feels better than it did. So, now what we're going to do is going to make sure that I didn't break anything. Let me actually tighten that up a little bit more. I'll just see at what point was it too tight. So I backed off about a half turn and I've just put half of that back in it. So ultimately I've taken about 1/4 turn off from its maximum tightness at this moment, and that still works. And the gap is closed. The gap is still here, it's just not as predominant, which is, it's acceptable. The only way to fix that, and I know now that the only way to fix this here is to take the entire thing back apart. Take these buttons out, take everything back out just so it's just this atomic purple shell here. Take my heat gun, heat this up just a little bit, and bend it slightly in the opposite direction of its current bend. That would fix it permanently, but that would probably take me around 30 to 45 minutes to do the whole thing, so I've taken it apart, bend it, put it back together, and it's not worth it because I feel like I've gotten it good enough as is. So let's see if it works. So both the R buttons work. Plus is working on every actuation, which is good. So it looks good. Everything's working. So I know it wasn't a full breakdown, but I figured it was enough to make a little bit of a video about. I hope it helps. You can always put a comment in the comment section below and I'll answer. But if you do have any questions, make sure you ask. And that's it. So, see you guys later.